it's grown out of state culture because it was his money. He had to decide everything. What does General Motors do? General Motors does what an 800-pound gorilla does. It does what it wants to do.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Ehsan Ul Haque, and I have had the privilege to work for LUMS for 35 years now. I have been in business school. I've been the dean, and currently I'm a faculty member there. We have come together here to talk to my benefactor and maybe a benefactor of so many people at LUMS, a person who needs no introduction, and I'm talking about Syed Babar Ali. Our topic today is to talk about management challenges which Pakistan faces, and we have been facing these challenges for ages. And in Syed Babar Ali's personality, we have a person who have such a broad exposure of variety of fields within Pakistan. So we would like to pick his brains and learn some lessons from him, because he has been learning lessons from everybody else so far. So we are going to take this time to learn some lessons from him. Assalamu alaikum, Babar sir.
Thank you.
Kya haal hai aapka?
Fine, thank you.
Great. So let's talk about management lessons. But I can't stop, because when I was coming here, I was just thinking of 1985 when the first time I was driving to see you. And it was amazing that I drove for 1 hour for an interview with you, which lasted half a minute. So my first question is, has that been your typical way of recruiting people?
No, today I'm not involved in recruitment, but I thought that, it doesn't take too long to judge, a person, especially, I did ask you questions about your education, about your background, as to where you came from. And so I had a lot of respect and regard for the way the Pakistan Ordnance Factory was set up. And anybody who was related to or had any connection with that organization, I knew would have all the ingredients of being a disciplined person.
Well, I'm impressed that you remembered Ordnance Factory.
Yeah, I mean, this is that, and that was why your academic credentials were what we were looking for, and the rest was taking a chance and the fact that you've been there for 35 years, you've contributed. Thousands of students have benefited from your guidance. So it's been a very good journey.
A wonderful journey, wonderful journey. I have to repeat the statement that you made. All you said was that we will not be able to afford a BMW for you, and that's it. And that was Chaliye. So today I want to talk about management lessons that you have learned, because you have had such a varied and rich experience. And we divide the economy into 3 segments, primarily the government, public sector, and in the private sector we have for-profit sector and then not-for-profit sector. And you have had a significant contribution, mashallah, in all 3. So my first question to you is, which sector did you find the most challenging and difficult to work in?
I don't think I found any of these 3 difficult, because the approach to any work that I do is I sort of jump into it with total commitment, not halfway to see if it works or not.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, when I took over the challenge of working in the public sector, I had not even seen a bag of fertilizer before I was appointed as the chairperson of fertilizer industry. And so I went to Islamabad and talked to the Secretary of Production, Mr. S.B. Awan, who was overall responsible for the public sector at that time. So I asked him, I said, why me? He said, I know you for the last so many years, because he previously was Chief Secretary Balochistan, and we had served on certain boards together, board for Pakistan Tourism. And so we had interacted, and And he said, you know, I have confidence that you can do it. So my one question to him was, who will call the shots? So he said, you will call the shots. And then my next statement to him was, then I will define what a shot is. So I will not come to you and ask you whether I could do it or not. I will then take the ownership. And this is what happened the 4 years I was in the public sector. I can tell you, I did not get a single telephone call that I should employ this person, or I should employ that, or I should buy from that person. I had a free hand. And but free hand didn't mean that I did not follow any protocol, any discipline. We had to. We knew that it was government money, and we had to be accountable for every penny we spent.
Right.
And I'm happy to tell you that, you know, we were given, over the 4 years I was there, I spent over $500 million in foreign exchange, plus the rupees that were required. And there was not one audit objection, because we had laid out a system which was very robust, and it was, and we followed that, and there was no deviation. When I came to I grew up in the private sector, and here again, you know, I was very young, very inexperienced when I was given the responsibility to put up packages, and luckily we were able to have our joint venture partners, the Swedish company belonging to the Rousing family. They provided all the guidance, and I meticulously carried out their advice, because it was a joint venture. It was like a baby belonging to the two partners, and there was never a doubt about the bona fides of each other. We trusted each other absolutely, and I was totally 24 hours committed to putting up that plant and working with the people that came from Sweden, and build up a local team also, because I knew that the Swedes will not be here forever. So we recruited young people from the universities, from the engineering university, from the School of Economics, from technical high schools, the blue collar workers. We recruited people who were totally raw, and then trained them the way we were. Then going into the not-for-profit sector, which was essentially a worldwide fund for nature, here again, because I had working experience, and I knew nothing about conservation or anything, I depended on the technical support that we got from the parent organization. But here again, we recruited young people who had an open mind, who were hungry to learn, and who were committed. And you know, working in the not-for-profit center, it requires another skill, another attitude of life, where you are not thinking of yourself, you're thinking of nature, you're thinking of people, you're thinking of what you can do for the future generations. So you have to look for people who have that mindset. And in all the three, I had no problem at all. I enjoyed all three, and so that way I was very lucky, because I can tell you, I wouldn't pick up anything that I didn't enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
I was not looking for any recognition. I was not looking for any compensation, because I was, you know, my parents had made sure that we lived comfortably. So in all these three, the idea was not what do I get out of it. It is what can I do for it. So that was the attitude, and by the grace of God, I was very happy.
Great, great. Sometimes I feel that, you know, because this is the trend, especially post-Reagan era, this whole idea that private sector is the way to go forward, and the government should learn from the private sectors. Sometimes I feel that the private sector do not fully comprehend the complexities of the government, and I'm just talking about our, you know, friend Shabar Zaidi, who was, you know, such a great accountant and yet had a...
No, having worked for 4 years in the public sector, I realized its shortcomings and its compulsions. And I can tell you, when I, stepped down from the Fertilizer Corporation, I was called by the governor of Punjab, and he said, each province during Mr. Bhutto's time set up a provincial industry, sugar industry and textile industry. So he inherited those industries and they were not running at a profit, they were running at a loss. And he asked me, he said, I want you to take over these Punjab, belonging to Punjab government. And I said, sir, I've done my national service, so I want to go back to the private sector. So he asked me, he said, what should we do with it? I said, sell them off, auction them, give them away, because every year you will have a meeting to evaluate as to why we have lost so many tens of millions of rupees. There'll be a commission, they'll come to no conclusion at all. You'll keep on putting money in. And I told him, I said, the basic reason for that is that government does not realize that a manager can make mistakes.
Right.
I said, it's like, I can give you a term that, a military term, that when a person is sitting on the turret of a gun, he's firing away shots. Sometimes he hits the target and sometimes he doesn't hit the target. You can't penalize him for not hitting the target. And in government, you do not forgive a person for making a mistake. NAB goes after him. With the result, nobody takes a decision. And in business, whether it's industry or commercial, the worst thing is not to take a decision.
True.
If you take a wrong decision, you can correct it. But if you don't take a decision, you never get anywhere. So that is the reason why not only Pakistan government, no government, I would venture to say, has been successful in running an enterprise where you need to take decisions.
But decisions need to be taken everywhere,
Sure.
not just in enterprise.
Yeah, I mean, you say in politics, they can always keep on deferring decisions. And the bureaucrats, one way of survival is not to take decisions.
True.
That's why nothing happens.
And then there's a huge cost for that lack of decision.
And nobody is willing to cost it.
So are you saying that there's no way we can correct this, or somehow?
No, you can't correct it. You can't correct it. You can. You have to change the basic mindset. And I can tell you, because I've done a fair amount of reading. I give you one example. My grandfather, my Nana, he was a bureaucrat. He was in the political service in the early 1900s. He was very bright. He was selected to go to Afghanistan as in those days they called him agent to the government of India in Kabul, which was equivalent of being an ambassador.
Right.
He told them that because I'm going as a representative of the government, I will need to entertain, so I will have to get extra allowance. And so they moved that he should be given 250 rupees a month for entertainment. Now, this document was originated in the Ministry of Home in Delhi, and went through various steps to the Viceroy,
Right.
and finally to the Secretary of State in London
Okay.
for 250 rupees.
Right.
Because the British had, they had set up this system of civil service here to keep everybody busy in pushing files from here to there and nothing happening. The only thing they were ensuring is that there be good law and order, and that they would be totally concentrating on how to transfer wealth from from India to the UK.
Mhm.
So they were not interested in having an efficient system here. They had a limited number of colleges, limited number of schools. You know, when the British left in 47, the literacy in the whole of India was 14%, 1/4. But they put these colleges up in Lahore and Delhi and elsewhere in Bombay, Calcutta, to create a cadre of young men, primarily young men, some women, who would help them run the country. And you know, in the pre-partition, one heard a figure of about 1,200 ICS officers who were running the whole of India.
True.
The population was 300 million at that time. And on the law and order side, they had a very efficient police force. They trained up army, but they had learned from the mutiny that the army should be manned by British officers. So even in British Indian regiments, they had British officers, and they split up the regiments so that it would be, you know, partly Sikh, partly Hindu, partly Muslim. And then, of course, they had the British Army here, who would be totally independent.
But then, you know, your argument seems to be that the reason our bureaucracy works the way it works is because the Britishers designed it like this.
Yeah.
So are you saying that the bureaucracy in UK works differently?
No, you can see, you have seen this, Mr. Minister.
Yeah, we have seen this.
It's identical to that one, because they didn't know any better. But you see what has happened, that I give you a very interesting story. Recently I read somebody who I have a lot of respect and regard for, Montague Singh Ahluwalia. He was Dr. Manmohan Singh's right-hand man,
Right.
economist. He was a Rhodes Scholar. He went to Cambridge, then he went to Stanford, got his PhD, went to the World Bank or IMF, and came back to India. And he was telling me, I mean, he was writing in this book called Backstage, that he was recognized. You know, he was invited back from India, from the IMF. They knew that there was a very bright economist, so he got into Rajiv's personal secretariat,
Right.
Prime Minister's. So when Rajiv took over after his mother's demise, he went on a world tour. He went to Moscow, he went to Washington, he went to England. And while he was in London, you know, in each of these, except for Moscow, capital, there were always leading Indian economists that Rajiv would invite them to seek their advice, what we should do. And he quotes the economist that came out of London, Dr. Basu, and he said, you know, we are struggling in India in our economy. It's moving at a very slow pace. What would you recommend? He said, sir, the easiest thing is make a bonfire of all your regulations.
Okay.
He said, that is the way to go forward. So unless we have somebody who has the courage to have a bonfire of all these regulations that go back to the 1800s in our book of rules, we'll never go anywhere. And in our business, the business that I've been involved with, we don't have any files at all. We take a decision on the piece of paper that comes to you, either yes or no, and that's it. We don't even write notes to each other. I mean, I've never written a note to any of my colleagues, that we should do this or that. You pick up a telephone and say, this is my idea, what do you think? If he agrees, good. If he doesn't agree, then he has to convince me.
But are we losing history in the process then?
What good is history if it's going to bog you down? The whole idea of history is to learn from it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let me move to my other question, and that is, again we are talking about the three sectors, and you said that you found each one of them to be equally challenging. And which one did you find the most rewarding to work for?
I think what I'm doing today, this is also not for profit. I'm spending a lot of time on education. LUMS is one of them, the main sub. But I'm very much interested in Ehsan College, in Sacred Heart, the school I attended, Ali Institute of Education. I've set up 2 schools in the village that we are there. So to me, this is much more exciting because you're doing things which have never been done before.
But aren't you being unfair to for-profit sector, because at the end of the day, all of these activities are run by the surplus that you generate in the for-profit sector?
Yeah, but that doesn't matter because I mean, you've handed over the for-profit to people who have worked with you, and they are doing a better job than I did.
Okay.
I've set up my own foundation, and I can tell you that my foundation has invested in the companies that I've been involved with. You can't invest directly from a foundation. I bought shares in those companies and donated it to my foundation. So this is how the foundation today has a stream of income coming from these companies.
Right, right.
So I'm very much interested in the welfare of these companies because my foundation has to survive. Has to have money.
But somehow my feeling is that when I compare Pakistan and with our experiences in the US, the businessmen and their success is celebrated there. Here we seem to keep a very low profile, and we don't want to, it seems as something which is not kosher somehow.
No, everybody, I mean, you have people who keep on thumping their chest like a gorilla, of the things that they have done, the taxes they pay, and the exports that they do, and
But that's once a year, get a small...
But I would say these are all nourish people. It's new money. So this maybe in the second and the third generation, if they survive, they will mature and be more sedate. But today, I mean, the private sector in Pakistan has done well, I would say, as compared to the public sector. Well, public sector has been a total failure. Private sector has done well, and what we really need to do is to liberate it, give it more opportunity to venture out, both here and elsewhere. And we find that the bureaucrat has nothing else to do except put roadblocks, prevent you from doing anything.
Actually, you are leading into my next question, which is now we are talking about for-profit sector. And one of the questions which vexes me, and because we teach cases and all the cases are invariably talking about big companies, whether they are US based or Indian based or wherever, somehow you feel that Pakistani companies have problems scaling up. They have not scaled up. We hardly have any multinationals. Or
one reason is that it's grown out of state culture, where the owner felt that because it was his money, he had to decide everything. And when he came of age to retire, he thought there was nobody better than his own son.
True.
Whether he was capable or not. And therefore, the scaling up can only happen if you have better people working for you.
Right.
And better people will only join you if they have an opportunity to grow.
Right.
So this is something which the multinationals have got over this. In the last 100 years, some of the big companies that are old and mature, these were also started by individuals, Lord Overhume and Mr. This or Mr. That. But then they found out that the only way they could grow was to get people who were bright, young, motivated, and they treated them as a partner, not as an employee. This is what Mr. Reuben Rousing did. And he started not very long ago. I mean, he started in the 1930s, with a limited capital. And the first thing he did was to pick up the 3 most bright students from the London School of Economics to work with him. One survived, 2 left him, And the one who survived became a billionaire.
But 70 years of our existence and we have not learned this lesson that...
Well, I mean, we've done it in our organization. We today have, I would say we today have at least 40 people in our organization who could be managing directors of any company, and they are managing our group. You know, it's a fairly large group today. Right. And over the years, they have been trained, they have been mentored, they have been encouraged, they have been, trained. So I would say that I have no disappointment in this talent coming up. We have drawn a very strict line between ownership and management.
Yeah, that's a big...
And what we have said that the owners are shareholders. Managers are the real owners of the companies that they run. They have to take all the decisions. And they have to be compensated on the basis of what they produce. And this is what is happening.
But this idea has spread to other companies?
Gradually. I wouldn't know, I mean, we've done it.
Okay. But your global footprint is still relatively small?
Very small because we are not allowed to take money out. Very limited.
You are saying that regulation comes in the play?
India, I can tell you, India has no, you can take, I think there's no limit to what you can invest abroad. I can tell you one company that I know very well, Mahindra and Mahindra. They have an investment over $1 billion in the United States.
And what's the limit in Pakistan?
There was $5 million, but it's in theory. It takes about 2 years to get that permission. And who's going to wait for an opportunity abroad?
You touched upon this separation of ownership and management, I think, which is linked to my next question, and which is again with Pakistani businesses. We see a lot of interesting businesses, exciting businesses, but once the generation turns over, then they flounder. The next generation just divides the company rather than dividing the shares.
Because I think that one basic factor is they don't want to pay taxes. And invariably I've seen in many instances where companies are owned by brothers, they don't only cheat the taxpayer, taxman, they cheat each other. So that's why they want to fall out.
But we have so many disaster stories in Pakistan.
The basic fact is that they don't want to pay taxes.
All right. Chaliye, let us move on to my next question, and that is about, because you have had such a rich experience, not just in Pakistani businesses, as you mentioned a little while back, also in a lot of multinationals, Nestle, Coke, and I'm going to split this question into two different domains. One is in management and the other is in the governance. How do they go about? So what is the key difference that you see in the management of these Pakistani organizations and multinational organizations? Because we have been blamed by many people that our students, they just rush to multinationals all the time.
Well, multinationals, you see, have a very set, I would say, I'm using the wrong word, code of conduct, in the sense everything is spelled out. I mean, we haven't gone to that extreme, but I remember in the olden days when IBM was run by Watson, he insisted that everybody should wear a white shirt.
So the dress code was very strict. Yeah.
So it's not that one, but they want you to follow the book, because multinationals are in maybe 100 different countries.
True.
And they want to use the same criteria of decision making here as elsewhere. The brand, because they are very keen that their brand should not be disturbed, should be protected, and therefore they want to make sure that you don't go and claim in the newspaper something that is not valid. So it's a very regimented kind of behavior. in a company. But those companies have also realized that they need to keep on reinventing themselves. I'll tell you a very interesting story. In my journey through life, I was at one time in the cotton trade business. I started a long time, soon after partition. Then we had an oil mill in Hyderabad, and I was running that oil mill. We'd buy cotton seed, extract oil, and then from cotton seed, we should what we call decorticated. You broke the shell, and from the shell you took the fiber out, and you had linters and you had hull fiber and all that kind of thing. So I got interested in how to. I went to America. I used to go there regularly because for one reason or the other there was an opportunity to go. So I went to Memphis, which was the heart of cotton trade.
Okay.
And in Memphis, because I was in the cotton trade, I knew people who were in the cotton trade there. So I asked them, "Can you take me to an oil mill?" And they said, "We've tried, but they don't allow any outsiders to come in. Not only a foreigner, no outsider." Okay. A few years later, my nephew, my eldest brother's son, Asad Ali, he had just sort of finished his studies. His father was ambassador in Washington. So he knew one of the assistant secretaries in the State Department, Mr. McGee, who came from Texas. So he said, "My son is going to go back and work in an oil mill. Can you have him placed in an oil mill in Texas?" So he approached a company called Anderson Clayton. They were very big in this thing in Dallas. So my nephew got job there. So I went to see him, and we were in the process of adding some equipment to our oil mill in Hyderabad. So I took the plans of our expansion there.
Okay. All right.
So I asked my nephew to introduce me to the production manager, and I said, "We want to do this. Can you help me whether we are taking the right decision or not?"
Right.
He opened up and he said, "This is good. This is not right. You should do this." So I turned around to him. I said, "I'm very surprised because 3 years ago I was in Memphis. Nobody was around." He said, "We were exactly like that. We found out, we thought that we were ahead of everybody when we had the doors shut.
Okay.
And when we managed to sneak into somebody else's place, we found that they were far ahead of us."
Okay.
And now we have opened our doors to anybody who can come and wants to see us, because then we can go and see everybody else.
Right.
So this is how the American industry has learned
Transformed.
That you can learn from each other, you can help each other. So I'm just telling you that we have not gone through that phase at all of learning that you have to. Then it's not equipment.
Right.
It's the brain behind the equipment. It's the innovation, the productivity which comes out of, it's the same car. One person gets 18 miles to the gallon, the other gets 15 miles. So it knows how. It depends on how to drive the car, the same car.
Right. So we have to learn this.
Yeah, you have to. The emphasis.
Open up.
One open up. The other thing is that the human element is not. You cannot replace it today by machinery. Your ability to innovate, to think, and to do things which are not in the book gets you ahead of others.
Although nowadays in this digital era, this whole idea of artificial intelligence will replace human beings.
People have to think of something else.
Yeah. All right. And if we talk about governance, you have been on the board of maybe almost all the multinationals in Pakistan. Many, yeah. And then of course in Pakistani organizations. Key differences that you see in the governance itself?
Well, one is openness. There are no secrets, within the company.
Right.
And there, the other thing is there is no such thing as a slush fund, which is the root of many issues and problems. The other thing is no tolerance for lack of ethics. And the other thing is recruitment on merit.
And people say that you can't survive without all these things. So how come they are surviving?
Who?
The multinationals.
No, they are surviving because
without slush funds, without these, you can't survive.
Because the size. You know, I learned a statement that I learned at Harvard about General Motors at that time. I'm talking of the 70s. What does General Motors do? General Motors does what an 800-pound gorilla does. It does what it wants to do.
Right.
So when you get to that size, when you are 2 or 3% of the country's GDP,
Right.
then you have a say.
So scale comes in here. You know, the scale comes in. All right. Okay. So openness is one, and you are saying anything else in the governance of these?
I think ethics, ability, and then total support of their home government.
Okay.
If you touch Citibank, the American investor is going to come and knock at the door of the finance minister.
Right.
They better listen to him.
Do we get similar support from our people?
But who's going to listen? You know, I mean, we don't have that firepower.
No, I'm saying if you were touched outside by some government.
No, I would say, I mean, we are in Sri Lanka. We've got a factory there.
Right.
But I can tell you, I've never seen a government so proactive and so friendly to foreign investment.
As the Sri Lankans?
Sri Lankans. At that time, I don't know what it is today. I went and called on the finance minister in Sri Lanka. He didn't know me at all. I said, we are going to have a factory. We are going to put up a factory here for making packaging material, and we're going to invest money. We got permission from the State Bank at that time. And he said, Mr. Babar Ali, I won't give you 100% support. I'll give you 200% support. Can you imagine anybody telling a foreign investor here?
Well, we talk about investment.
No, I know, but we don't. We talk, but there is no action, no follow-up.
Chaliye, let me move to the next, and this is a little tricky. You know, in our classes we use cases, and we learn from success stories, but we also learn from failures. Sometimes you learn even more from failures. So I'm sure in your business ventures you must have had your fair share of successes and failures. Could you narrate one of the successes that went beyond your expectations, and then, you know, what did you learn from that experience?
Well, I mean, package itself is a success, I would say, and the reason it's been going on is because we have all the time reached out to our suppliers of equipment who keep us abreast because they are selling it around the world. You ask them what are the best practices elsewhere, who is ahead of the curve. We learn from our customers, and 90% of our customers are multinationals.
Right.
And they are buying packaging material all over the world.
Right.
They'll tell you that our supplier in Finland does this, why don't you go and talk to him? So this is how we have kept ourselves abreast. In a company which I was fortunate to be involved with was Milkpack, setting up this UHT milk, long life milk, and then Nestle came in, and our relationship with Nestle, how they came in, and we partnership with them, and you know, it took me 15 minutes to shake hands. And the way it happened was that
in Pakistan or in Switzerland?
No, here.
Here.
What happened was that we started Milkpack. It had all the learning problems, issues, this and that, but we finally landed on our feet by getting a lot of support from Tetra Pak and from our machinery suppliers, and we were making money, but not that much, and but our product was gaining market share. I mean, we were the only ones in that market at that time.
Right.
And one of the marketing manager told me, he said, there's a Nestle man who is posted here to sell Nestle products out to Switzerland. He's come to see me because he, in one of our earlier ventures, we were giving technical support to government of Tanzania in packaging industry.
Right.
There's a case written on that. And he was there in Tanzania. And he and this Swiss were living in the same building. So he knew at that time. His name was Wormlinger.
Oh, right.
So Wormlinger had been transferred to Pakistan. So he went and called on Mujib Rashid,
Right.
his friend, who was marketing manager of Milkpack. So Mujib said, he's asking a lot of questions about what we are doing. I said, feed him everything, but don't exaggerate. It must be absolute truth. So a few weeks later, he said, he's come to him and he said, our zonal manager who is responsible for this zone right up to Switzerland, New Zealand, Japan, China, everything, by a Swiss gentleman by the name of Rudy Chan. He's coming and he wants to meet you. I said, most welcome. But before you bring him to me, take him to see our milk collection center, how we are buying milk. Then take him to the factory which we are running. Then bring him to packages, walk him through packages, then bring him to my room so that I don't have to tell him anything.
Okay.
He has seen everything himself, what we have done. So he said, Mr. Babar Ali, Nestle has decided to come to Pakistan. We have two options. Our first option is if you will take us as a partner. Our second option is we'll go for a greenfield project ourselves. I said, Mr. Shan, I am looking for a partner. Just to give you the background, I was running Milkpack for a number of years. I found out that just by buying milk, processing it, packing it, there was very little money in it. Unless we went in for value-added products like baby food, like powder milk, like brand and technology, we will not get anywhere. So I was looking for a partner. So I told him, I said, Mr. Shan,
When you were looking for a partner, you had not thought of Nestle at that time?
No, I had not thought of Nestle. I had thought of a company in Denmark and a thought of a company in Netherlands. These people have come with that Angro.
Right.
I went there, they were very keen to work with us, but they wouldn't get down to, coming to a decision. When I went to Denmark, there was a company called Danone, D-A-N-O.
Right, very famous.
And luckily, the manager of Danone had been a Tetra Pak employee. He recognized me. He said, why are you here? I said, I'm looking for a partner. Don't waste your time. He said, we are a cooperative. We want to send our milk. We are not interested that you should develop your milk.
Right, right.
So later on, I realized that the company that I was dealing in Netherlands was also cooperative.
Right.
So I went to Denmark, to Netherlands twice. They wouldn't show me the factory. It's under repair, it's this, that. So with Nestle, I came to this conclusion that, so I said, he said, how can we come together? Now, if you looked at the financial structure of Milkpack, we were 1/3 shareholders. I got in
IFC
Tetra Pak.
I thought
IFC was also there. I got Tetra Pak and I got Danish turnkey dairies.
Right.
They were the equipment suppliers because they were interested in the development of this so that they could sell equipment to others.
Right.
So I said, between the three of us, I control 80% of the shares. So he said, how can we come together? I said, you take 40%. I keep 40% that belong to me. You run the company. And the price of the share is what is on the stock exchange today. he nearly fell out of his chair. The price was 27 rupees 50 paisas. This morning it was 6,000 and it had gone up to 12,000.
Right.
Not a bad decision. It took me 15 minutes. I asked him, I said, how long will you take? Because I told him, I said, I've been giving the run around
Right.
by the Netherlands company.
Right.
Netherlands company.
Right.
He said, give me 10 days.
Okay.
Within a week, I got a message from him, our board is approved.
So we were talking about successes. How about a business venture that didn't do as well, failed? And
You know, parallel to the milk pack plant, I also wanted to set up a modern dairy farm.
okay.
And in that, I went around the world looking at different dairies,
Models, right.
models. I was in Australia, and I went to Western Australia because I knew of a person a farmer there, whose father was in Pakistan. His name was Hay, Hay. He ran. He set up a very successful kind of establishment in Basra Gully.
Okay.
And our family bought it when the family decided to migrate to England. So that was the connection. So I went to him and I said, you take me to farms in Western Australia because the climate in Western Australia is the same as in Lahore.
Achha. Okay.
So he took me there, and so I said, I want to set up this farm. So we arranged, and I sort of got him as a consultant, and we brought in a plane load of 125 heifers and calf.
Okay. Which year is this?
This is 78, 79, 80. And we set up a modern dairy farm. We bought land in Sheikhupura, not very far from the milk pack factory. And then we wanted a manager. So Hay and I both went to England, got a headhunter. He, rounded up a number of farmers who were in dairy farming and hired a person who claimed that he was third generation dairy farmer.
Okay.
We brought him here. Unfortunately, I had not interviewed his wife.
Achha. Okay.
We built a house there so that he could live. And running a dairy farm is 24-hour commitment. It's not 8 to 5. Now, she was an Anglo-Indian from India. She said, you are a Saab, you can't work over the weekends. So he wanted to play cricket in Lahore. And, she persuaded him to behave like a colonial Englishman.
All right.
He didn't bother too much. And, these animals have to be taken care of 24 hours,
Right.
24/7. They had to be inoculated with the right kind of vaccine and all that. That didn't happen. So, foot and mouth, he struck. We ran that place for about a year and a half. As soon as they struck, they started dying like flies. And that broke my heart. I sold all the cows, sold the land, and never looked back.
Venture finished. So the key lesson is you better interview the wife. As we were saying that a lot of young people are now more interested, which is great. They want to be entrepreneurs. But the advice to them would be somewhat different from the managers.
They have to go through, they must know the nitty-gritty first.
So it's better before starting to learn the ropes first. So work somewhere. Learn at somebody else's expense. Okay, rather than just jumping.
Then you'll be totally floundering.
It's
Then you
interesting.
keep on learning from your mistakes.
Right.
If you have that ability.
Yeah.
Unless you drown yourself.
Right. It's interesting that, our very first batch, Burhan and
They all went and worked with
they all went and worked with Mia Mancha and learned the ropes, and then, all.
We've had hundreds of people going through our organizations. Not everybody stays with us.
Right. Lots of entrepreneurs have been generated from packaging itself.
And we welcome that.
Is there a secret for this, creation of these entrepreneurs? You seem to have a incubation center there.
No, but it has to do. It has to come from inside.
Right.
Passion. Just as you can't fall in love
Right.
by reading a book.
Right.
You have to have it in you.
Yeah. So it is, one is born.
But not bound. It can be created.
Yeah.
It can be nurtured.
Mhm.
And you also you can learn from other people's experience.
Right.
Emulate.
Let me now come to LUMS. I didn't want to talk to LUMS a lot but at the end of the day, LUMS is where I have been all my life. When we read literature, it's very interesting. I was reading an HBR article, 2 nights back, and they were talking about organizations like human beings also having a soul, and especially as they grow, sometimes the soul is lost. Some other people use the word DNA. So there is a DNA of the organization. So make sure that you don't lose the DNA of that organization. So if I ask you, what would you think constitutes LUMS soul or the DNA that we should make sure that we don't lose it?
One is meritocracy. Students, faculty, staff, and how it conducts itself in day-to-day running. No compromise on ethics. Those are issues that need to be. I think there should be freedom of thought. There should be encouragement for people to broaden their horizon. Scientists should study Bulle Shah. A businessman should study Ghalib or biology.
Right.
Those are things which ultimately make you a human being, a complete human being. And this is, I think, the primary responsibility of a center of education is not to limit the person's either thinking or imagination or his opportunity.
Right.
You should give them every opportunity to dabble in anything they want to do. Even in the last 2 weeks, I keep on thinking of my own mother a lot because I owe a lot to her. She was self-educated. She never went to school. She was married in 1904. Her father, who was a very enlightened person, got the right kind of teachers to come, and he had 3 daughters. My mother was the middle one, to come and teach them Urdu and Persian. Mm-hmm. And then I said, how can I pay homage to my mother's memory? So I called up Bilal Tanveer and I said, I want to provide opportunity to students at LUMS, especially senior students, to study Urdu and Persian. And so I will give you a certain amount of money, an endowment, and then you do what you like with that to ensure that you attract students from different schools to dip into Persian and Urdu. Because I think a life of a Pakistani settlee is not complete unless you have a sampling of these 2 very important languages. So this is something that, and we need to keep on doing this.
This has just started.
I've done it already.
Right, but the students have not started yet.
No,
Yeah, it is just,
the money is there.
Yeah, money is there, right.
So the ball is in his court, not in my court anymore.
Okay. All right. Okay. Anything else apart from we are
Well, the other thing is we are very interested that we should get scholars coming in and talking to the students on different subjects. Arifa Syed, she's a wonderful scholar. We should get this fellow Muhammad Hanif to come and talk. People like that. But surprisingly, it's so absurd that people from the security are worried as to what we are teaching at LUMS. One fellow came to complain to me कि आप मंटो पढ़ा रहे हैं. To them, Manto is a persona non grata. He is a hero of the century, of the last century. I mean, Abdul Salam.
Right.
I mean, I was horrified to see that his picture had been defaced the other day in Gujranwala. Students went and put black ink on his picture. We should be ashamed of that. Here was one person who, the only Nobel laureate we've had, and who decided not to change his passport.
Right.
He wanted to die as a Pakistani, and he's buried here. And then we had the temerity to go and deface his tombstone, where it said Muslim scholar. They said wipe out the word Muslim. I went to pay homage to his tomb. I saw this word Muslim being erased from his tombstone. Where are we going? Does it make you a better Pakistani?
Unfortunately, the movement is in one direction.
I know, but this is something, unless you speak out, I mean, to me, this is absolutely sacrilege. This is not the Jinnah, Pakistan the Jinnah wanted.
I'm coming to the end, and it's interesting that a few years back I reached 60 years, and I was, thinking over, and you get a little apprehensive, perplexed, and you think that it's the end of life, and then it just occurred to me that you launched LUMS when you were 60, almost 60, right? And then after that, 70 School of Art and Sciences came, 80 School of Science and Engineering came, and 90 School of Education came. So if it's no business secret, what are your plans for the next 10 to 20 years?
Well, I plan for the next day, not beyond a day. But I would say that one should never give up. When it's time for you to go, you'll go anyhow.
True.
But don't go before you're gone.
Right.
So, and you should bat to the last ball.
But the energy and enthusiasm that you have of bringing after every 10 years some new school.
No, but this is something that you have to keep on, pushing yourself. Because the day I've had both my knees replaced.
Right.
And I was in a hospital for 22 days. And while I was in the hospital, because I been from the management background, I was watching everything that was happening. And, I was in the rehab center, and they used to make you walk every day to make sure that your legs got exercise and all that. So I was passing through this nursing station, and I saw an elderly person sitting, very well dressed. So I stopped there. I said, "May I know who you are?" He said, "I'm Dr. So-and-so, I retired." So I said, "Why are you here?" So he said, "Instead of sitting at home, I've decided to volunteer myself to come and help these nurses look after their patients." And he said, "I'm so happy that you're walking, because if you lie down for 4 days as a healthy man, all your muscles will disappear. So this is what happens not to your muscles, your brain's muscles disappear if you don't keep on working them." So another very interesting incident, but 7 years ago I was at a conference at Stanford, and there were 3 people. This was something to relate with Pakistan, the people from the Foreign Office from Pakistan, from the State Department, and there was some academia. And George Shultz, the previous Secretary of State,
Right.
He spends his time at Stanford. He was there, and also Secretary Perry. He was Mr. Secretary of Defense at one time. So they both lived there. So we 3 were. So when my turn came to speak, and I said, "Well, we 3 are the elders sitting here, George Shultz and Secretary Perry and myself." And George said, "How old are you?" I was 89 at that time. I said, 89. you are a kid, I'm 94. So you at 60 are a kid. So don't give up. And I tell you the best thing, Ehsan, you can't get any rich. What you could make, you have made.
Right.
Now this is the time for you to give. You can't give money, you give time. You give mentoring. You give advice. And it will make you richer.
I'm sure.
So my advice to you is, don't give up, otherwise you'll be 6 foot under before you realize.
Right.
Because the minute you switch off the brain,
Right.
then the whole body starts switching off, which has no control over you.
Well, one great thing of being in a university is you can't switch off your brains.
Yeah, well, I mean, so long as you keep on walking, talking,
Right.
rubbing your minds. The most important thing, especially for an academician like you, is that you have to keep on challenging yourself. You know, because of my granddaughter being at Palo Alto, I have this wonderful opportunity to spend time there
In
summers, months, and get to know people of
Silicon Valley.
senior. So last year I met for the first time Dr. Gerhard Casper. He was former president of Stanford. You know, for every retired president, they give him a room, a desk. You come and spend your time here and you have your door open so that people can walk in and, you know, learn from you. So I asked him, I said, while you were here as president, what new thing you introduced? He said, I insisted that all the senior teachers should teach the most junior classes. So, you know, I mean, there's so much to learn. It's not written in any book. And you remember Jim Austin?
Bilkul.
I used to visit him whenever I went to Boston.
We used to call him Jesus Christ.
Yeah, he looked like one.
He looked like one.
And what a wonderful person he was. And in his room, as a reminder to him, he had said, have you helped any student today? That was a reminder to him. That was his prime job. Have you helped any student today? Because your job as an academician is that you have to produce students who are better than you.
We have produced plenty of them.
No, this is wonderful. It should give you tremendous satisfaction.
Yes. Yeah. One of the best things in teaching is you get straight away. Feedback is immediate. And you always feel so happy when you meet your students who have done far better. Chaliye ji, we'll stop here. Thank you very much.
No, I hope this was useful.
No, it was definitely, it was useful. Why not? Talking to you is always fun and, you know, a lot of learning. Thank you.